You ever have something you've worked hard for, something you've taken care of for years, just ripped away from you because some smug neighbor thinks they can? That's how my war with the HOA started. I've owned my cabin for almost 15 years. It's tucked deep in the pines, a good 20-minute drive from the nearest gas station, and separated from the county road by a narrow wooden bridge that crossed over a little creek. My dad and I built that bridge together back when I bought the place. Thick oak beams, hand-cut planks, reinforced with steel bolts so it could handle my truck. It wasn't just a crossing. It was mine. It was personal. Now, here's the thing. My cabin is not in the HOA. Their jurisdiction ends a good half-mile before you even get close to my land. But that didn't stop them from trying to push their rules on me. I was used to their silly letters, complaints about my unkempt property, or eyesore shed, neither of which were any of their business. I usually tossed those in the burn barrel. But this was different. It was early morning, cool mist hanging over the creek. I was sipping coffee on the porch when I heard it, the sharp whine of a chainsaw echoing through the trees. I put my mug down and jogged toward the sound. And there they were. 3 guys in neon vests, 1 with a clipboard, 2 working the saws, cutting my bridge apart. The air smelled like sawdust and gasoline. Splinters flew as they tore through the beams. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yelled, charging toward them. The clipboard guy didn't even look nervous. He just said, "Sir, we've received multiple safety complaints from the HOA about this bridge. It's being removed." "From the HOA?" I shot back. "I'm not even in your stupid HOA." That's when she stepped out from behind one of their trucks. Karen. Shoulder-length bleach blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, clutching a stainless steel tumbler like it was a trophy. "Actually," she said, tilting her head, "the board decided this bridge is a hazard to the community. And since it's on our road." "Your road?" I barked. "Lady, I own the land on both sides of this bridge. This isn't your road. This isn't your anything." She just smiled, that smug, tight-lipped smirk that made my blood boil, and said, "Not anymore." By the time the sheriff arrived, called, conveniently, by them, the bridge was already in pieces, my only easy way in and out of the property reduced to a pile of broken planks on the creek bank. The sheriff, of course, was polite but useless. Told me it was a civil matter, and I'd have to take it up with the HOA board. I stood there, looking at what was left of the bridge. 15 years of history, destroyed in under an hour. And as I stared at that pile of wood, I made myself a promise. They thought this was their win? They had no idea what was coming for them. Because I was about to find the one thing they cared about more than bossing people around, and take it away. After the bridge incident, I didn't leave my cabin for 3 days. Not because I couldn't. I rigged up a makeshift crossing with some old scaffolding boards, but because I was furious. Every time I replayed the moment in my head, I could see Karen's smug face, hear the clatter of my bridge hitting the creek bank. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about the bridge. It was about control. She wanted to remind me that she could reach me, even if I wasn't part of their HOA. Well, she picked the wrong guy to push. I started digging. Not literally, not yet, but in the way that matters. I pulled county land records, water management permits, anything connected to the area. And that's when I found something interesting. See, my cabin sits upstream from the HOA's prized possession, a sprawling lake with immaculate waterfront homes, each with a private dock. The kind of place where boats cost more than most houses. I'd never really cared about the lake before, but now? Oh, now it was the bullseye on my dartboard. Here's the kicker, the lake wasn't natural. It was man-made, and it was held in place by a modest, decades-old dam built on a strip of land just outside the HOA's official boundary. Meaning it was owned privately. Meaning it could be sold. I almost laughed when I saw the name of the current owner. Some out-of-town retiree who had inherited it years ago and didn't even live in the state anymore. A quick search told me he'd been trying to sell off various parcels of land in the area, probably without realizing the gold mine he was sitting on. I called him. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. He wasn't sentimental. He didn't fish the lake. And the dam was a maintenance headache he'd be happy to get rid of, for the right price. The price? Less than the cost of replacing my bridge. Oh, it was tempting. But before I jumped, I had to be sure what I could do with it. I called a friend from my college days, an environmental engineer, and asked him some hypothetical questions about dam ownership, water rights, and lake drainage. He told me that as the legal owner, I'd have full control over the water flow, provided I followed state regulations. Translation: I could drain that lake down to a muddy puddle, and there was nothing the HOA could do except cry into their property value estimates. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just revenge, this was justice. They took away something I loved without permission, so I'd take away the thing they loved most. I set the purchase in motion. The dam would officially be mine in under 2 weeks. But I wasn't going to just drain it suddenly. No. That would be too quick. Too merciful. I was going to warn them first. Let the panic build. Let Karen squirm. The night before the papers were signed, I walked down to the creek where my bridge used to be. The moonlight danced on the water, and I could hear the distant hum of the lake spillway. "You wanted a war, Karen," I said under my breath. "Hope you can swim." The deed was signed on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, I was the proud owner of the most important piece of land the HOA didn't control, the dam holding back their precious $3 million waterfront. Holding the paperwork in my hands felt electric, like I had a nuclear button that only I could press. But I didn't press it. Not yet. No, I wanted to introduce myself first. That evening, I printed up a letter, short, polite, and dripping with just enough formality to make it sound threatening. Notice of water level management. Effective immediately, as the legal owner of the dam and associated water control structures for Lake Redwood, I will be reviewing and adjusting water levels for environmental maintenance purposes. Expect noticeable changes to lake access, dock usability, and shoreline conditions within the next month. Sincerely, my name. I made 32 copies and hand-delivered them to every lakefront home in the HOA. I didn't tape them to doors. I didn't leave them in mailboxes. I personally walked up to each porch and knocked. Some homeowners just took the letter and muttered, "Thanks." Others looked confused. But then there was Karen. She opened the door wearing a pink visor and holding a wine glass like she was about to scold a waiter. She took one glance at the letter, and her face went from casual annoyance to pure rage. "What is this supposed to mean?" she demanded. "It means," I said, keeping my voice calm, "that I own the dam now. And I'm lowering the water level soon." "You can't do that," she snapped. "I can," I replied, "and I will. Good evening." I turned and walked away, leaving her shouting something about lawsuits and City Hall. Over the next week, the neighborhood buzzed. You could see it in the way people gathered in driveways, pointing toward the lake. You could hear it in the HOA's thinly veiled emails about unauthorized interference with community resources. Then, the real panic began, because I didn't touch the dam yet. The lake stayed full. The docks were fine. But every day I walked down to the dam with my toolbox and just worked. I'd tighten bolts, check valves, take measurements. Sometimes I'd just sit there with a lawn chair and a fishing rod, whistling while Karen's little minions stood across the property line trying to see what I was doing. The uncertainty was killing them. One Friday, I accidentally let slip to a neighbor that I'd be opening the floodgates that weekend. By Saturday morning, I counted no less than 8 HOA members standing on the opposite bank, whispering frantically while I slowly walked up to the control wheel. I didn't open it all the way, just enough to make the waterline drop an inch every few hours. By nightfall, the floating docks were resting half on the shore. Sunday morning, I found an envelope under my cabin door. Inside was an official-looking letter from the HOA's attorney, claiming I was violating community rights and endangering property values. I sent them a one-line reply. The HOA has no legal authority over this property or the dam. And then, just to drive the point home, I cranked the wheel 2 more turns. The sound of rushing water filled the air. Somewhere across the lake, I imagined Karen's wine glass slipping from her hand. By Monday morning, the HOA wasn't just panicking, they were desperate. I knew this because my phone wouldn't stop ringing. First, it was the HOA president's friendly call, pretending to check in on how I was adjusting to the neighborhood. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the text. "You are required to stop all water manipulation immediately. This is your final warning before we take legal action. You're destroying the community." I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I went back to the dam with my toolbox. By now, the lake was down a good 18 inches. It might not sound like much, but to a waterfront HO, it was catastrophic. Boats were sitting at weird angles in their lifts. The once perfect mirrored reflection of their fancy homes now had a muddy ring around it. Docks creaked under their own weight. Karen? She was losing her mind. I spotted her one afternoon, standing knee-deep in the muck at the end of her dock, waving a measuring stick like she was surveying crime scene evidence. Every few minutes she'd march back to her house, probably to fire off another angry email. That week, the HOA called an emergency meeting. How do I know? Because one of the quieter neighbors, an older gentleman named Hank, decided to fill me in afterward. According to Hank, the meeting's pure chaos. Half the board was screaming about property value. The other half wanted to negotiate with me. Karen? She wanted to take immediate legal control of the dam and have me arrested for environmental destruction. Here's the thing. I had already spoken to a lawyer before buying the dam. Everything I was doing was legal. The lake wasn't even considered a public waterway. It was classified as a private pond with managed inflow and outflow. And I owned the outflow. Translation? I held all the cards. The following Friday, I decided to give them a taste of what total control really looked like. I opened the floodgates another quarter turn. The sound was incredible, a deep, roaring rush that seemed to echo all the way across the lake. By sunset, the waterline had dropped another foot. Boats were now resting fully in the mud. Fish flopped in shallows. The lush, postcard-perfect shoreline HOA used in their real estate listings looked like something out of a drought documentary. That night, I got a knock on my cabin door. It was 2 board members, not Karen, which already told me they were trying the good cop routine. They came with an offer. They'd rebuild my bridge. They'd publicly apologize. They'd even pay for part of the maintenance on the dam. All I had to do was restore the water to its original condition. I smiled, thanked them for the offer, and said I'd think about it. Then I went inside, turned off the lights, and laughed until my sides hurt. Because the truth was, this wasn't about the bridge anymore. This was about teaching them, and especially Karen, a lesson they'd never forget. And I was just getting started. By midweek, the HOA had moved from threats to action. Early Tuesday morning, a thick manila envelope was taped to my cabin door, legal summons. Karen, the HOA president, had followed through with her promise. They were taking me to court. The claim? Willful and malicious destruction of communal property, interference with property value, and environmental harm. I had to laugh. The lake wasn't communal property. The HOA's covenants never extended past their subdivision boundaries. But here they were, trying to drag me into a fight they had no hope of winning. The trial date was set for 3 weeks later. I didn't waste time. I called my lawyer, Richard, a calm, almost too relaxed guy in his early 50s who had an annoying habit of grinning whenever the other side made a mistake. "You own the dam, right?" he asked on the phone. "Yes. I have the deed and the maintenance rights." "And they signed a sworn complaint saying the lake is HOA property?" "Yep." "Perfect," he said, chuckling. "We're going to end this before it even begins." In the weeks leading up to the trial, the HOA doubled down. Karen posted angry rants on the neighborhood's Facebook group, claiming I was holding the entire community hostage. They even took pictures of the muddy shoreline and posted them online with captions like, "This is what happens when outsiders invade. We're losing our homes because of one selfish man." What they didn't realize was that every post was more evidence, proof they knew the water level changes were caused by me, and that the property line they claimed included the lake didn't. The day of the hearing finally came. We met in the small county courthouse, a beige, echoey room with an American flag in the corner and the faint smell of old books. Karen came in wearing a bright red suit jacket, clutching a blue binder so thick it looked like it had every email she'd ever sent. She had 2 HOA board members in tow, both looking smug. I walked in with Richard and a single black folder. That was all I needed. The HOA's lawyer went first, launching into a passionate speech about environmental responsibility and protecting shared resources. He painted me as some kind of rogue villain who had taken the community hostage by draining their lake for personal revenge. Karen sat in the front row, nodding dramatically with every word. When it was our turn, Richard stood up slowly, flipped open the folder, and handed the judge 2 documents. 1. The original deed to the dam property, signed, sealed, and recorded with the county. 2. A topographical survey of the area, showing in clear, undeniable terms that the lake was a man-made pond with no legal connection to the HOA's property. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look at Karen. "Your Honor," he said, "this case should be dismissed immediately. My client has sole and exclusive rights to the water control structure. The HOA has no jurisdiction, no ownership, and no standing to bring this suit." The judge adjusted her glasses, flipped through the papers, and looked at the HOA lawyer. "Is this correct?" she asked. The lawyer stammered. Karen leaned forward, whispering furiously, but it was too late. 5 minutes later, the case was dismissed. Not only that, but the judge ordered the HOA to cover my legal fees, which meant Karen's revenge lawsuit just drained their budget instead of their lake. As I walked out of the courthouse, Karen stormed past me, muttering something about finding another way. I smiled. She had no idea that her another way wouldn't matter. The courthouse win should have been the end of it, but Karen didn't know how to let things go. Within a week, she had already started her Plan B. Flyers appeared in local shops and mailboxes, claiming I had irreparably damaged community life and urging residents to boycott any local businesses that served me. She even went so far as to file a noise complaint about my generator, despite the fact I live a full half-mile outside HOA jurisdiction. It was pathetic, but it made me realize something important. Karen was never going to stop. She had embarrassed herself in court, and instead of learning a lesson, she doubled down. So I decided to finish this permanently. For years, the HOA had relied on their lake as their main selling point. Every glossy brochure for new homes in the area had the same cover photo, aerial shot of the glistening water surrounded by million-dollar waterfront properties. The thing is, their property values depended on the lake staying full. The second that waterline dropped too low, the illusion was gone. The dream they sold to buyers evaporated, and I owned the single piece of infrastructure keeping that dream alive. Over the next few weeks, I began lowering the water level, legally. Not all at once, but slowly, steadily. My official reason? Dam maintenance and structural inspection. The county required that I check the dam gates and spillway every 5 years. That meant I could drop the lake as far as I needed for as long as I needed, and the HOA couldn't do a thing about it. I scheduled the inspection for early summer, right before their prime real estate season. By late May, the waterline was already a foot lower. Docks no longer touched the surface. Waterfront yards looked less like tropical retreats and more like swampy mud flats. Karen called me 3 times in one day. I ignored every call. Then came the emergency HOA meeting. A friend of mine who lived just outside their neighborhood went purely for entertainment and later sent me the recording. Karen was pacing the front of the room like a cornered animal, ranting about property value collapse and this man's reign of terror. One older resident asked, "But doesn't he own the dam?" Karen froze. You could hear the awkward silence in the room. 2 more weeks passed, and I cranked the gates open another half-foot. By now, the lake was unrecognizable. Boats sat stranded in mud. Fish flopped in the shallows. The once beautiful shoreline was a cracked, weedy wasteland. Local realtors panicked. Buyers pulled out of contracts. Houses that once listed for $1.2 million sat unsold for months, some dropping in price by over $300,000. The HOA's annual budget relied on selling at least 2 waterfront lots per year, and they weren't selling a single one. The final blow came in mid-July. I received a certified letter, not from the HOA, but from their own bank. Turns out, without new sales, the HOA couldn't make their loan payments for community improvements. Their cash reserves were drying up faster than the lake. The bank foreclosed on several HOA-owned parcels, and without those assets, the HOA could no longer legally operate. Just like that, Karen's kingdom collapsed. A month later, the HOA officially disbanded. The neighborhood dissolved into a regular, ungoverned community. No more dues, no more ridiculous rules, no more Karen. The last time I saw her, she was loading furniture into a U-Haul, glaring at me across the dry, cracked basin that used to be her waterfront view. I walked up, tipped my hat, and said, "Guess it's hard to run a waterfront community without the water." She didn't reply, just slammed the truck door and drove away. I've since refilled the lake, but only halfway. Just enough for my own fishing and kayaking, but not enough to give anyone the illusion that it's a luxury resort again. And my bridge? Rebuilt. Stronger than ever. Sometimes revenge isn't about striking back right away. Sometimes it's about taking away the thing they value most and letting them watch it disappear inch by inch.